This story has been recorded at an Addictive Eaters Anonymous meeting in New Zealand. You can email us at contact@aeanz.org.
My name's Esther and I'm an addictive eater. For me, I can remember right back to my childhood having the craving, and I wouldn't have known what it was then, but it would start with a little thought in my mind, like I'd think of something that was in the cupboard that I wasn't allowed in the pantry, and I would wait till there was no one around. The thought wouldn't leave me alone, basically, until I went and got whatever it was. And so I'd sneak around and wait till there was no one around and go into the pantry, and I'd think, I'm only going to have one and no one will ever know. And but I couldn't stop at one. I never could. I would eat more than that. I'd eat so much that it would be really obvious that someone had eaten it. And then I'd be in fear that I was going to get caught, scared of what would happen. And, I usually did get caught, and then my mother would come to me. She always came to me and said, did you eat this? And I would not be able to say yes. I would say no. And I would be bright red, so she'd know I was lying. And then I would get in worse trouble because I lied. If I had been honest, I wouldn't have got into trouble. And that was, I felt quite ashamed of that. And just things like stealing. We were on a camping trip, and my parents had bought a bag of sweets to have in the car. They used to do it I think when we were on long car trips, just to get through, with 3 children. And they would be in the car for most of the holiday because we would be at the camping ground and we wouldn't be in the car very much. And I would have to wait until the coast was clear, steal the car keys, go into the car, get a mouthful of these sweets, and find just a quiet place to sit and eat them. And that was my holiday, I was trying to get those keys. I just remember feeling quite, I never seemed to be able to get along with the other kids at school, and I used to feel quite sorry for myself. And I would come home from school and that food would make me feel a lot better, I'd just start eating. So for me, that went on. It wasn't obvious from the outside that I had a problem until I was a teenager and I started to put on weight. And I didn't even notice for quite a while that was the case. And then one day I saw a photo of myself and I was really shocked at what I saw. I was big and I had no idea that I was. And I was in my school uniform. It was just a photo of me. And around that time I started to, because I'd always played netball, but I used to come home from netball practice, 7:30 at night, and everyone else would have eaten dinner, and I would be able to not eat dinner that night. And that was the first time in my life that I would ever consider skipping a meal. For most of my life I didn't understand that. I was like, why would you? Even when we'd be, had a huge Christmas lunch or something like that, I would still want dinner. Anyway, so I started to find that exercise helped me to not eat. And also I thought, well, I'll lose weight. And so, I kind of dabbled a little bit in that as a teenager. It wasn't huge what I did, but I kind of was always going up and down basically as a teenager. And then I went to live overseas, and I was an exchange student when I was 17. And the first half of that year, I was just eating. It was terrible because they had very cheap confectionery there, and this family used to just buy. They had a cupboard full of it, and it was, you could help yourself basically. But it was really weird because even though it was absolutely free to eat as much as I wanted to, I still hid it, and I still was sneaky, and I was still, very secretive about my eating. And I put on weight, and I was probably the biggest I've ever been when I was 17. And then the second half of the year, was in the middle of the year, I started to eat lots of fruit and vegetables and, do exercise again, lots of biking, lots of playing soccer, and lots of eating, a lot more healthily. And and then I started to lose weight, and that was kind of the passion for me. But then what happened was I went to greater extremes. Basically, the disease kept on getting worse. So in the periods when I was eating, I seemed the quantities got more. And then in the periods when I was not eating, I found that for me, I'm just not someone who can do a diet out of a magazine. I just have never been able to do that. I am someone who, if I want to not eat, I just have to not start. So I would basically just not start eating as long as I could. I would put it off as long as I could. So I went through a period where I would, put off eating as long as I possibly could. So I'd only eat every second day, and I'd try and wait till dinner time to eat. And then I'd binge, but I could do that. I could hold it off for long enough that I was a normal weight. To look at me, I probably looked normal. But to be like that, it took an immense amount of willpower to do that. Where I'd eat lots of raw vegetables, I remember eating raw silver beet and things like that, just to hold off the eating, basically. And I became a vegan, and I did that for a year. I didn't eat any animal products for a year. And at the end of that year, I thought to myself, I need to reward myself for not, for being vegan for a year. So I bought a packet of biscuits, which were definitely not vegan, and I started eating them, and I couldn't stop. And around that time, I really, I lost that, so all of that, being able to not eat for days on end and things like that just stopped. But the thing that really bothered me was my thinking was really, my thinking absolutely tortured me, so the constant thinking about food and about my weight was what made me try and get help. I just was constantly thinking about it. And the other thing was, I realised, I started to become aware of it in a way I never had been before. So one day I was sitting in a library, and I'd gone to the section that talked about eating disorders, and I'd found a few books, and I was sitting at a table, reading these books, but on my lap I had this huge pile of food that I was eating while I was reading, and I suddenly realised what I was doing, and it was quite a, it was a moment I just thought, this is insane, this is really insane. And the other time I remember was that I was feeling worried or anxious or something. I can't remember what it was about. But I went down from university to town, and I went into a shop and I bought something and ate it. And I ate it on the way to the next shop. And then I bought something there and I ate it on the way to the next shop. And then I bought something there and I ate it on the way to the next shop. And I went around town like that. And all the time I was looking over my shoulder because I thought, well, if someone is following me, they'll see what I'm doing. And in the end, I felt really sick because of all that I'd eaten. And I had this thought, and I just thought, oh, I'll just eat something healthy and that will make me feel better. So I bought something which was probably not even healthy, but, in my mind it was. And I was sitting there eating it, and I suddenly realised I feel sick because I've eaten so much, and my only thought is to eat more. And, I really realised how insane that was. But anyway, it took me quite a while to start looking for help, and I did find a group of people, a fellowship, and there were people there who weren't eating, and it took me a little while to get there. I kind of was, I remember meeting someone and she told me her story, and she had been in mental hospitals and had a lot of psychiatric medication, and she had very bad teeth, and I thought, she was probably bulimic, and I didn't relate to that. And so I thought, from being desperate the day that I rang her to when I met her, I just thought, oh no, I'm not that bad. And I went away and I honestly thought, I'm not going to try and be thin anymore. I'm not going to go on these huge long runs or, do various things that I was doing. I'm just going to, try and eat normally. And I I had a friend staying with me at that time, and so we were eating, breakfast and dinner together. And so I thought, well, I'll just eat what she eats. And so she would have breakfast. She would have her cereal for breakfast. And then I would, eat with her. But as she would finish and go to work, and I would have more cereal. And eventually I would get out of the house, and then I would, be onto the next thing sometime, and it would be all through the day. And then at night I'd come back and we'd have dinner together, and she'd have a plate full of food, and I'd go into the kitchen and finish the rest off. So I knew I couldn't do it. And around that time I had made contact, and someone called me from out of the blue who I hadn't met. She'd got my number off the other member who I'd met. And I remember very clearly she was in Hamilton for work. And I was absolutely blown away that someone I'd never met would call me. And I felt really alone at that time because I lived in a flat with other people and none of them were like me. They were just normal people. And I felt very alone with what I was doing. So that made a big impression on me. And eventually when it got bad enough, I rang her back and went to meet her, and she shared about her eating, which I don't really remember. But she also talked about being a people pleaser, and I related to that, and that's when I got tears in my eyes and I thought, well, there's more wrong with me than just my eating, that was the first time I had that thought. So I came to a meeting and I really knew I had found something. There was just something in that room, and I have kept doing that. Coming to the same meetings and doing all of that. I kept doing it for a number of years, and I stopped all the binging, and the weird behaviour with food stopped. But I didn't stop the weird behaviour with exercise, which was a big part of my... it got worse after I started coming to a food fellowship. It really became quite... in my mind I had to do exercise or I would be full of fear. And, it was just, things that I would do, just walking for endless miles. I remember one day I walked a huge long distance to this woman who was giving yoga classes in her house, and I did yoga, and it was really quite, like aggressive yoga. And then I walked back, all the way back, and felt absolutely exhausted, but I thought, oh, well, that's great. And I would walk down to the bottom. So I was at university, and I used to come from... Wellington is very hilly, so I used to come from the top of the hill down to the university, and I could go in the back of my building at about the 3rd floor, but I wouldn't. I would walk all the way down the stairs to the basement level and then walk back up the stairs. And and I would feel if I was sick or for whatever reason I couldn't do that, I felt very uncomfortable. And I didn't know that was a problem, really. I wasn't honest enough with myself to see that. And basically what happened was I went to the same place with the exercises I had with the food, and it was actually worse. It was more mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I just hit the absolute bottom of that I have ever experienced, and I was very baffled until I heard someone sharing, and she talked about her own experience, and I heard something in there. I heard her willingness and her surrender for the first time, and I really realised I didn't have those two things. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought, I know what it is, it's the exercise. And so I was honest with someone about what I had been doing. And I thought, right, well, that's it. I won't do it anymore, but I couldn't stop. So I would get a little thought in my head like, oh, I'll just do this, it'll be good for me. And I would go and do it, and then I'd be, oh, I've done it again, there I go again. And that was when, around that time, I have a very strong memory of getting down on my knees and asking higher power, which, I call God, just for this one day sober off everything, and not really believing that would happen. And around the same time, everything was a real mess, like just everything. And so I felt very sorry for myself one day, and I rang someone, and she said to me, what have you done today for another addictive eater? And I didn't have an answer to that. I think I might have said, I've prayed, I pray for people or something. And she said, well, that's good. But I just started hanging on to those words, and trying to do something every day. And I really thought that if I didn't, then I would eat. So, any little bit of service I had to do, I was like, oh, that's good. That's something I can do. And it was quite a change in attitude from how I had been. And the other thing that happened was that I became willing to do what my sponsor suggested in all areas of my life. It was kind of like I'd handed over the food and thought, well, I need help with that, but actually everything else I'm fine. But I realised I wasn't, and I needed to change, and that was painful. I was afraid to change. And at the same time, I really didn't trust myself at all, so I really didn't know if I would be able to get well. And I had to go to extremes to stop the exercise because it was so insidious. I had to really go to the absolute extreme of not doing anything for a few years. But that was just what I had to do. And through that, I just believe God's removed the problem because, I haven't, like today, now in my life, I just don't have that fear of, thinking, oh, I haven't barely stepped outside this weekend, it's been freezing cold, but I'm not afraid that I haven't done it, I don't feel anxious that I haven't done exercise, or I don't obsess about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to lose weight and my size, or and it's one thing that because I'm still completely powerless over all of this. It's not me that is doing it. But one thing that really helps me, if I ever get a thought or something like that, like every so often my head will try it on, like, why don't you get off the bus early and you could walk up those I don't even know how many steps it is. It's like hundreds of steps going up the hill from my to, that's near my house. And every so often my head will go, oh, you should do that. And I'll just kind of go to myself. I don't fight that thought because I know I can't fight it. I'll just go, well, God's either removed the problem or he hasn't. And the thought will just go. I don't think I can win against this, but I do believe that, I can be free of it for today. And that is amazing to me. I just can't really believe it. I thought I would be someone who, I was kind of in my early 20s when I first came, and I thought that I really used to think about when I was old and in an old people's home and I couldn't get the food, and how would I cope, and or if I knew if I had children, I would just be eating all the time. And I do have children now, and and their food is safe from me. I'm not eating the biscuits that they have baked today, or and the other thing is I'm not sitting in this meeting thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get home, because I would be thinking about that. I'd be sitting here thinking about that. So that feels like freedom to me, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you.